Hello, today's tutorial is on Warrior Pose 1, Virabhadrasana 1. This is a hip opener and standing balance posture. It involves the internal rotation of the femur. It requires the hips flexibility. It stretches out the glutes, hamstrings, hip flexors, quads, and also the ankles. And it requires and strengthens as well the legs, the ankles, and the knees. So let me first start with a demonstration of this pose. We can start in mountain pose Tadasana, so our feet are at hip width apart, our arms by the sides of our torso. We are going to step our back foot. So let's go with the left foot this time. So let's step our left foot back, and the back foot is at 30 degrees relative to the front foot, and we'll talk more about this later as well. The front heel is aligned with the back heel. Okay, so adjust yourself if you need to widen your stance so that eventually your knee will not exceed the heel. Okay, so from here we are gonna inhale, bring our arms up above the head, drop your shoulders, do not flare them up, and let's bring the front knee to 90 degrees if you can. Engage the glutes, lift the back kneecap, and keep your back heel on the ground if you can. Stretch your torso up, open your chest, and bring your arms above your head. Warrior Pose 1. Okay, now let me talk about very common mistakes in this pose. One most common mistake is where the knee exceeds the heel. And this can happen if the stance sometimes is too short. So your feet are too close together, but you can actually bend your leg deeper, but then you try to bend it and then your knee exceeds the back heel. As you see, the posture looks entirely different when you do it this way, okay? So one next mistake is where students find it difficult to actually keep the hips square to the front, and then they end up opening the hip and doing something like that. So the hip is open out and then the arms are up. They're not facing to the front. Okay? So one other mistake as well is where the back leg is bent, and oftentimes this is due to tightness in the hip flexors and quads, as it requires actually flexibility in this area in order to lower your front leg and to keep the leg straight, the back leg straight. And later I'll talk about modifications, of course. And one other mistake as well is where the back foot, the back heel is lifted off the ground. So the leg can be straight, but students might lift the back heel off the ground. Okay, not only makes it harder to balance, but I know this can be caused by the lack of ankle mobility, because it actually requires a lot of ankle mobility to keep the heel on the ground. And as usual, I'll talk about modifications later. So one other common mistake that I see is that students might compensate their shoulder tightness by overarching the back. Like, understand it is difficult to have the hands above, actually overhead by the ears. So any shoulder tightness, it manifests this way where the arms are unable to go by the ears. So one thing I see students do is that, okay, they want to bring the arms up anyway. And then, so instead of working on the shoulder mobility, they try to arch the back, and then they end up compressing the spine, which is not good as well, because eventually this pose, we are supposed to lengthen the spine and not just like compressing it backwards or having hyperextension in the neck. And of course, we do not want to flare our shoulders up, because that can be caused by tension and of course our stress in day-to-day lives, and we walk around like that, and then when we do postures, we do it like that, and then we try to overarch the back, something like that. Okay, so let me talk about modifications. One easier modification that we can work with is if you're having difficulty keeping your hips aligned straight to the front, your hips are opening up. Initially, I said the alignment is that the front heel is to the back heel, but we can try to bring the back heel out, the back foot out externally. So instead of keeping it aligned, we're just gonna shift it. And that gives you more space. Okay? And so you can try this variation and see if it helps you align your hips square to the front. And of course, to correct all the other common mistakes where the back might be rounded, all of this, it helps actually to shorten the stance. If it's too difficult to come down low and it requires more ankle mobility and stretches the hip flexors more, you can shorten the stance. Keep your heels aligned if you wish. And then if your shoulders do not go further up, do not compensate with the back. Just try your best. Your leg does not have to go down into 90 degrees because I know that's also very difficult to achieve for most students. So you just try to shorten the stance, leg stays higher up anyway, hips square, and then shoulders down and lengthen the spine. Okay, and you will benefit anyway because you'll feel it in the hip flexors, in the ankles, depending on your level. Otherwise, like I said, you can shift your foot outwards to give you more space. As you see, it should be simpler for you to keep the hips square to the front, and you can do the same thing and do not need to lower the front leg too much. Okay? And keep the spine up and use your abs. So let me talk about alignment. We have already spoken about the heel to heel alignment. So, all right. Now let's talk about the 30 degrees foot angle thing. So, as I've mentioned always already, I don't think one solution fits every single student because after all of our bodies are different. All of you are at different levels and your bone structure, your anatomy is all different. So understand the classic yoga alignment always says the back foot at 30 degrees, but how realistic it is for many people. So at the end of the day, if shifting it a bit, your foot pointing inwards a bit or outwards a bit might help you, please feel free to try that, okay? I know more often than not, it actually is easier to externally rotate your foot more instead of internally rotate it even more because that would require even more ankle mobility to keep your foot actually almost directly pointing to the front. So it requires so much more ankle mobility. So most students, it would not be the option that you are going for, but just experiment and see what feels best for your body. If you need to move the foot out a little bit more, feel free to do it, okay? So I really hope that this tutorial has been useful for you, and I hope to see you for the next tutorial. Namaste.